All right, we'll give it a few more minutes before properly starting, but just to get you started, I'm going to put up the first slide and let you think about that a little bit. And if you have any guesses about question on the slide, go ahead and put them in the chat, just kind of see if anybody gets close. In general, I'm gonna periodically try and check in with you guys to see if you're keeping up with the lesson and are needing to go faster or slower, and hopefully have some participation questions as well. By the way, the asterisk doesn't really, the asterisk just means that those two are poems rather than songs. I thought I should mark those out separately. All right, so we'll kind of get started. I'll introduce myself. So hi, I'm Naomi. And professionally, I'm actually a video game producer, but that's not really relevant to the class. But I grew up in New York City, the home of Broadway, and I am, at an amateur level, a singer and musician, and also a songwriter. So I'm going to be telling you about how songwriters make music and lyrics fit together, and hopefully if any of you want to try your hand at songwriting, this will give you some guidance for how to do that. Ooh, Emil has the closest guess so far. They're iambic. That is true but incomplete. All right, yeah, 505. So we'll properly get started, and I'll give you the answer, which is that all of these songs and poems, you can take the words from one and the tune from another. Obviously, the poems don't have a tune, but you can take the lyrics from one of these and the melody of another and sing them together. Any two. So, so I'll ask you guys, pick two of these off the list, and I will demonstrate. Yeah, just put in the chat. Oh, Suzanne and the Pokemon theme. Yes. I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana, my Susanna for to see. Or let's try it the other way around. I wanna be the very best like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause. So give me another one. Iambic tetrameter. Almost there, and not quite, but I'll cover that part in detail later. Oh, okay, so I got some more suggestions. Just Can't Wait to Be King in America the Beautiful. I'm gonna be a mighty king, so enemies beware. I've never seen the king of beasts with quite so little hair. Or, let's see. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. Supercalifragilistic and Yellow Rose of Texas. So Yellow Rose of Texas that I am going to see. No other soldier loves her, nobody, only me. With supercalifragilistic, it's really just the verse that works for this trick. The chorus is about the same tune, but the syllables are in a slightly different place. So anyway, hopefully I've proven to your satisfaction that this works for all of these songs. And we're going to come around to why. So I'm going to start off, though, with giving some definitions. So meter is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that you get in poetic verse that makes the rhythm of a poem. Scansion is how we talk about how we determine and analyze meter. You can also say whether a line of verse scans correctly, or whether something in that exercise I just did, you can say that each of these tunes scans to the others. And meter is built out of metrical feet. So you'd have a short sequence of syllables that'll usually repeat that pattern. So what do I mean by a stressed and unstressed syllable? So when you pronounce a word out loud, you're usually going to say one syllable with more stress than the others. And stress is relative, so you can have multiple syllables in a word that are more stressed than the others, though usually if you look it up in a dictionary, it'll tell you that one syllable in particular is the stressed one. So if you say create, you're going to put the stress on the second syllable, because if you said create, you'd be saying it kind of weirdly, that you're pronouncing it wrong. And so we have Shakespeare. It's a word where you put the stress on the first syllable. And then in multisyllabic, you have those two that are the more stressed syllables in the word. And so for the rest of this class, I'll be using this notation where a slash is a stressed syllable and an X is an unstressed syllable. So I mentioned, actually I want to talk first about the different kinds of stress. There's at least two different kinds. So what I was just talking about is lexical stress, and it's how you pronounce words correctly. And in some cases, if you use different lexical stress, you're actually saying a different word. So I had the example here of content with the stress on the second syllable, and content with the stress on the first syllable. And they're spelled the same, but they're slightly different words. So for example, content is an adjective and content is a noun. So you've got to watch your lexical stresses, because you're either mispronouncing the word or turning it into a different word if you get it wrong. Interestingly, this is not unique to English. Other languages do have it, but not all other languages. Specifically, French doesn't have lexical stress the same way, so their poetry actually has to work differently than English metrical poetry. But the other kind is prosodic stress. So lexical stress doesn't really matter for example, single syllable words, because there's no other syllables in the word for it to be relative to. But you can choose to stress a word relative to the other words in a sentence, and that isn't really something you can do a right or wrong way. It's just a different way of choosing to emphasize the sentence. So I have the example here. If you say, I love you, or I love you, you're emphasizing a different part of that statement, and in context that might change the meaning a little bit. But what, like if you want to emphasize, I love you and not anybody else, or I love you and I don't feel any different way about you. So you're just choosing which word you want to make most important here. And again, you can't really do it wrong. This is more of a stylistic choice. So yeah, lexical and prosodic stress. So now, you may recognize this line. Anyone want to say where it's from? All right, so this is a line from Romeo and Juliet. And yes, it is iambic pentameter. So I have the stresses written out. It's but soft what light through yonder window breaks. So you have an alternating pattern of an unstressed and then a stressed syllable 5 times. So an unstressed and then a stressed syllable is called an iamb, and that's one of the kinds of metrical foot. And so I have some others here. So for example, a trochee is the opposite. It's a stressed and then an unstressed syllable. And you can also have trisyllabic meters. So you have the dactyl, which is da-da-da, the amphibrach, which is da-da-da, and the anapest, which is da-da-da. Might want to remember these because I am going to refer to them again. Give me a minute to look at it. So everyone feeling good so far? Yeah, let me know along the way if you have any questions. All right, let's proceed. So yes, this is iambic pentameter, where you have 5 iambs in a line. And so you get loads of this in Shakespeare, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. If music be the food of love, play on. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. And that one I want to point out as an example of use of prosodic stress, because the word horse always lands on a stressed syllable. It didn't have to. Shakespeare could have written the line so that it didn't, but because it keeps being stressed 3 times in that line, you know that is really an important word in this line. And so iambic pentameter maybe has a reputation for being the fancy poetic verse, because in Shakespeare, because it's what you write sonnets in. But it's actually really easy to say a casual English sentence in iambic pentameter, such as, I have to take the garbage out today. So that's a very normal sentence that still fits this meter. So iambic meter is really very, very natural to speak in, which is probably why you find so much of it in poetry. And obviously on stage, if you're reciting these lines, you wouldn't deliberately emphasize the stresses, but you'd have to know that the rhythm is there as you say the line. All right, let's proceed. Let's look at some other meters. So this is a line from The Raven. Does anybody want to take a guess at what meter that is? Either the kind of metrical foot or in full, like iambic pentameter tells you both the kind of meter and the length of the line, how many syllables. But anyone take a go at either? And yes, that's right, it is trochaic octameter. So it's once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered weak and weary. So you have that trochee, da-da, and it's 8 times. So let's try another one. There we go. 'Twas the night before Christmas. What meter is that in? Quad meter? You're close. It is 4 4 feet, but generally we call the 4-foot line a tetrameter. I don't remember which is the Greek root and which is the Latin root, but that tetrameter is what it's usually called. But yes, it is 4 feet. Do you know what kind of feet they are? No, fair enough. Anapest, yes. So that is anapestic tetrameter. And so I mentioned Shakespeare has a lot of iambic pentameter. If you want to look at a poet with a lot of different meters, you can find a bunch of them in Dr. Seuss. So The Cat in the Hat is in anapestic tetrameter. And I believe there are parts of Green Eggs and Ham that are iambic, and if you say 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, that's trochaic. But yes, this is anapestic tetrameter. So let's do one more. It's from the Gashly Crown Tinies, which is a somewhat macabre alphabet poem in which a person dies on every letter of the alphabet. Duometer? No, because the dactylic tetrameter. Yeah, it is dactylic. I wasn't actually sure whether to call it tetrameter or not, because you've got 4 stresses there, but you don't have the full 4 feet. Although I am going to talk in a bit about poets do sometimes cut off some of the unstressed syllables. So let's say, yeah, tetrameter. So that's a good segue into different line endings. I don't know why these are called masculine and feminine. There's probably a deeply sexist root to it, but that is what they are called. So a masculine ending is when a line ends on a stressed syllable, and when you rhyme two of those lines, it's a masculine rhyme. A feminine ending is when a line ends in an unstressed syllable. And generally, you would rhyme the previous stressed syllable, and then the following syllable will either be the same or also rhyme. I have actually heard a song that rhymes spellbound with hellhound, and I thought that was very clever. Emil, I'm not sure what you're asking about couplets. You can rhyme 2 lines that are next to each other or not next to each other. It doesn't affect how you classify the rhyme type. You can occasionally stretch a rhyme over several syllables. In modern major general, there's a pair of lines that rhyme. It's about binomial theorem, I am teeming with a lot of news, with many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse. So yeah, sometimes a poet will change the length of the line in order to have a masculine or feminine rhyme. So this is a poem called A Psalm of Life by Longfellow. And so you notice that it's trochaic tetrameter, except that in lines 2 and 4, he's snipped off an unstressed syllable to have a masculine rhyme in those lines, where lines 1 and 3 have a feminine rhyme, numbers and slumbers. And you can do it the other way around as well. This is Sonnet 20 by A. Shakespeare. And in this case, he's added an unstressed syllable to the end of the line of iambic pentameter. So you're rhyming painted and acquainted and passion and fashion. Maybe he got tired of having to do masculine rhymes all the time in sonnets. All right, so we're about to transition into the music theory portion of the lesson. So let me know now if you have any questions about the poetic meter. All right, on we go. So I'm going to cover the basics of rhythm in music theory. We're not really going to talk about pitches at all, because we're going to be mainly dealing with rhythm in this class. So these are some time signatures. If you've seen like a conductor connecting going 1, 2, 3, 4, it's according to the time signature that you keep the beat of a piece of music. So the, here we go, tells you what the rhythm of the piece is. The top number is the number of beats in each measure, and the bottom number is how long a beat is. Although deceptively, a larger number means a shorter beat because it's referring to a quarter note or an eighth note. So in 4/4 time, each measure is 4 beats that are a quarter note long. On 3/4 time, it's 3 beats a quarter note long. 6/8 time, it's 6 beats an eighth note long, so the measures are technically the same length as in 3/4 time, but it'll be rhythmically a little bit different. Yes, and each measure generally has the same number of beats. If you want to change the length of a measure, you have to change the time signature. And sometimes a piece of music does change time signatures in the middle, but most of the time it'll keep to 1. So it's just quickly to show you what the different note lengths look like. So we've got a staff in 4/4 time here. So you've got, in that middle measure, you see 4 quarter notes, and then, it's the same length as having 2 half notes or 1 whole note or 8 eighth notes. Or as in the last measure, you can mix them all up as long as they add up to the same length. You can also use rests to make up the length if you have a break between notes, but the length of the measure is still going to be the same. And so the time signature is kind of like a fraction, because 4/4 is equal to 1, so the measure is the length of 1 whole note. There's another time signature that's 2/2, where it's the length of 2 half notes, and the measures are going to be the same length as they are in 4/4 time. Though again, as with 6/8 and 3/4, they're rhythmically a little bit different. But so here you can see the lengths of those notes add up to 4 beats or a whole note. So you don't have to have all the same kind of note in a measure as long as you're getting the right sum. Any questions before I move on to putting it all together? All right, so the first note of the measure is called the downbeat. And that should be the strongest note in the measure. And again, stresses are relative because if you have an even number of beats, as in 4/4 or 6/8 time, you kind of get a bit of stress halfway through the measure too. But primarily, you want the downbeat to be a strong note. And so we're going to try and match up the stresses in our lyrics with the stresses in the melody so that they go together. So here's another line of lyrics. Does anybody want to tell me what kind of meter this is? Yes, so we're looking at a trochaic meter. So it's twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So you can mark out the stresses there. So you've got alternating stressed and unstressed syllables. Now, let's try another one. Uh, so what? So what's the pattern of stresses here? And also, do you know what song this is? No, it's not iambic. Give you a hint, look at where the downbeats are. Yes, it's da da da, which is dactylic. So, picture yourself in a boat on a river, which, by the way, is from Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So this is sort of the easiest way to match things up by doing one beat per syllable and lining up downbeats with stresses, but it's going to get more complicated. So because we have a melody, the melody's rhythm is kind of more important than having the lyrics be perfectly metrical. When we were dealing with poetry, there wasn't a melody, and so the words had to have their own rhythm. And so poetry, that it tends to be more consistently metered because there isn't a melody attached. But if the melody has a rhythm, you can kind of stretch and squeeze syllables to fit into the melody. So got Twinkle Twinkle, and we've got another song to the same tune, except slightly different. Ba ba black sheep, have you any wool? And so here we've fit 4 syllables where Twinkle Twinkle had 2 by splitting the quarter notes into eighth notes. But we've still got a stressed syllable falling on the downbeat, and also halfway through the measure where we've got star and wool. And you can do it in the other direction as well by stretching syllables longer. So these are the 2 lines from different verses of I Walk the Line by Johnny Cash. And so you have one verse where you're stretching those quarter notes into half notes in the second measure. I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. But then the next verse, you're back to having 1 beat per syllable. I find it very, very easy to be true. And again, it's more important that we're preserving the rhythm of the melody. We don't have to have a strict meter or the exact same syllable count. And we don't have to have 1 beat per syllable, even if we have a fairly regular meter. So what's the meter here? Yes, that it is iambic. So yeah, it is really easy to fit iambic meter into 4/4 time or trisyllabic meters into 3/3 or waltz time. But here we have a line with a very regular iambic meter, but we've put it in waltz time by stretching out those some of those notes into half notes. So we get Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. But again, we still have those stressed syllables on the downbeat. And and so when you're doing it in music, you can go crazy with the amount that you're stretching and squeezing syllables, and sometimes you'll have completely different numbers of syllables per measure. I have a couple of examples here where they're really changing it up. So go downtown, things will be great when you're downtown, no finer place for sure. Or somewhere over the rainbow, way up So here we're really changing up the note lengths, and there's completely different numbers of syllables, but we still got the length of each measure consistent. And again, you have downbeats falling at the beginning. You have stresses falling on the downbeat at the beginning of every measure. And so one interesting thing that you can do with this is you can take the same lyrics and put it to a melody with a different time signature. So this is a hymn called How Can I Keep From Singing? And I always learned it the first way in 4/4 time. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. And then later I met people who had only ever learned it the second way in waltz time, or 3/4 time. My life flows on in endless song above its lamentation. And so, yeah, we've got different time signatures here with the same words and the same meter, but all the same downbeats. You have the same words at the beginning of every measure. And even with, I've mentioned that halfway through a measure in an even numbered time signature, you kind of get a slight stress. And you'll notice that they've also kind of emphasized those syllables in 3/4 time by attaching them to longer notes, which that's less of a hard and fast rule. You don't always do longer notes on a stressed syllable, but in this case, it kind of serves to help emphasize them a little. Anyway, one reason I like to use this as the example of changing time signature, which has been done to other songs as well, but in this case, so this line is from the verse, but in the chorus, they do in fact change where the stresses are. And they use some prosodic stress again. So the chorus in, well, I say the 4/4 time version, they do have a brief change of time signature there, which is why that 2/4. But the chorus ends, how can I keep from singing? While the chorus of the other version in 3/4 time ends, how can I keep from singing? So now we've got different stresses. We have how can I keep from singing and how can I keep from singing? But that's okay, because now we're in the land of prosodic stress, and you're allowed to say that sentence either of those ways, and it's not wrong. But you will notice that singing is still emphasized on the first syllable because that's lexical stress. We need to stress at the first syllable. We can't say singing. So if you have two songs to the same tune, they're going to have the stresses in the same place. So we have, for he's a jolly good fellow, or the bear went over the mountain. And so you've got that same stress pattern. And it's slightly confusing that I've put two stresses on the two-syllable word there. Remember, stresses are relative. And also, both of those words are trochees. We go da-da. So, and the stronger stress is on the downbeat. Anyway, so those have the same pattern of stresses, so you can sing them to the same tune. And so if you write a set of lyrics with the same pattern of stresses as an existing song, you'll be able to sing it to that tune. And actually an example that I once did was that I was writing a song about the novel Murder on the Orient Express, and there's a song about a train called the Wabash Cannonball, and I realized that Wabash Cannonball had the same scansion as Orient Express, so I wrote the song to that tune, and so it used the train names in the same places because it would scan the same. All right, how's everyone doing? Any questions? Okay, so now I'm going to explain why the trick in the first slide worked. And the thing those songs actually all have in common is called common meter. Or ballad meter. Ballad meter basically means common meter, but you're being looser about the rules. So it's not quite iambic. You can kind of call it iambic heptameter. It's actually alternating lines of iambic, tetrameter, and trimeter. So you have a line of 4 iambs and then a line of 3 iambs. So usually the second and fourth lines will rhyme. Sometimes the first and third lines will also rhyme, but you're alternating 8 syllables, 6 syllables, 8 syllables, 6 syllables. So going back to Amazing Grace. So we have Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. And sometimes you get slightly different lyrics. There's a version that goes, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free, which works because we're still in that same syllable pattern. And I actually wrote a song about common meter, so maybe this will help you remember. And you can sing it to any of the common meter songs. I'll try Auld Lang Syne. 8 syllables, then 6, you see, to an iambic beat. That's 14 in totality, or 7 metric feet. Now, strictly speaking, it's defined as A-B rhyme, but ABCB's also fine, you'll see it all the time. But you can sing that to the America the Beautiful or the Pokemon song or any of those. And hopefully help you remember how common meter works. So I have here 2 common meter songs, Amazing Grace and Auld Lang Syne, which you'll notice are in different time signatures. So we have the 3/3 time and the 4/4 time. But because they have that same pattern of stresses, so that you have that common meter pattern in both tunes. So if you wanted, you can do that trick that we did at the beginning of the lesson and swap them around. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Or Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And just swap them around to different tunes. Now, I mentioned ballad meter is common meter but less strict. So yeah, some of these songs do kind of fudge the pattern. And because that you've got the rhythm of the melody kind of carrying it, and so you can cheat a little bit with the words. So for example, we've got the Gilligan's Island theme song here. Anybody guess what I'm going to point out about it? Keeping in mind that we're looking at the pattern of scansion here. I mean, yes, common meter with a chain, but specifically, you've got those spots there and there where you have 2 unstressed syllables hills next to each other. So technically, you've got a couple of anapaests mixed in with the iambs. So it's just Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. So yeah, you've got some extra unstressed syllables snuck in. You've kind of got to squeeze those syllables together to fit them in. And I believe in other verses, you might only have one unstressed syllable in that spot. And sometimes even here's House of the Rising Sun, you've got 3 unstressed syllables put together, so you've kind of got to hurry to sing them. And it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. And so if you sing other verses in that, yeah, they'll usually have fewer syllables in that spot, because that's quite a bit to cram into a small space. So mentioned earlier, Wabash Cannonball is another one, and here you're also kind of missing a stressed syllable in the middle. The original, so Wabash Cannonball started as a poem, and originally that line was, "Now listen to the jingle and the rumble and the roar." Like, probably shouldn't have emphasized the now, because that's an unstressed syllable, but it's, "Now listen to the jingle and the rumble and the roar." So that's a very regular pattern, but we kind of dropped the now and we skipped that and in the middle. So it's, in the song, it's, "Listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar." You might notice there's kind of a space after jingle where you can slip in that other syllable in other verses. Plus you've got, and as she glides, you've got those 2 unstressed syllables put in together. But if you do another verse like, now here's to Daddy Claxton, may his name forever stand." So there you have you're back to the regular scansion, and then they do have that stressed syllable there. But yeah, sometimes you get anomalies where some lines will stuff in extra syllables or leave some out. And sometimes if you're leaving off an unstressed syllable at the beginning of a line, you can compensate by adding an O. "Oh, listen to the jingle, the rumble, and the roar." If you look at the sheet music here, you can see, so from the great Atlantic Ocean to the wide Pacific shore. And so there, you've got that syllable back, and you're putting it in there by splitting the quarter note into eighth notes. So common meter is not the only one you can do this with. It is, as its name suggests, a very common one. But you also get, for example, long meter, which is just iambic tetrameter. So I got an example here. "I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men." And as mentioned earlier, you can also do green eggs and ham to that. So it's, "I would not like them here or there, I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham, I do not like them, Sam, I am." So yeah, you can do the same trick as with common meter, as long as you find another pattern that is shared by 2 songs. In this case, you find a lot in poetry, because it's iambic tetrameter. It's very regular. So yeah, you can do the same thing with, like, stopping by woods on the snowy evening to Hernando's Hideaway. If you don't recognize that, you might have heard it used as generic tango music on TV. So, "Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. They will not see me waiting there to watch his woods fill up with snow." Although, and the sources I looked up say that long meter is supposed to be ABAB rhyme. A lot of these are actually AABB, so the rhyme scheme isn't quite as consistent. Also, some of these are technically in 6-line groupings instead of 4 lines, which you might run up against if you try the swapping trick. But yeah, you sometimes there are some songs you get partially in long meter before they switch to something else. So for example, Hallelujah. I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? So that last line doesn't fit into long meter, but the first 2 lines do. And I put green eggs and ham there because I think there are parts of it that are not in long meter. And I mentioned Lady of Shalott and Jabberwocky, which are kind of long meter and common meter fused together, 8/8/8/6 syllables. And so found something fun on Twitter where somebody played with the long meter this way. So again, because both of those songs start out with a couple lines of long meter. And so if you read this, you then kind of hearing the Ballad of Sweeney Todd to the tune of Hallelujah. And so, yes, we've had common meter, we have long meter. There are some other fairly common ones. It's really easy to find these in hymnals because hymnals will sometimes have indexes that tell you the syllable counts of songs and which songs have the same one. However, they don't check that they actually have the same scansion. So you remember How Can I Keep From Singing from earlier? That one technically has an 8/7/8/7 syllable pattern, but it's iambic, whereas Ode to Joy has the same syllable count and is trochaic. So they don't fit to each other, but you might find an index that would list them as the same syllable count. So you gotta be careful there. But if you do find 2 songs that have the same stress pattern, then you can swap them. Or even if they're patterns that are kind of close, sometimes you can still make it work. And I had some other fun swaps. I don't want to dwell on the tune swapping too much, even though it's a fun party trick. But you can, once you know how these patterns work, you can figure out which ones will fit to each other. And sometimes it's a funny combination. And like if you're doing, I remember how the green says young. Well, as my love, you do me wrong, to cast me off so discourteously, for I have loved you so long, delighting in your company, etc. Yeah, my favorite things noticed with line reorder because you do have to swap a couple of lines to make them fit, but fortunately my favorite things is a list song, so that still works. So you can do raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. These are a few of my favorite things. Anyway, moving on, we have a last note. Sometimes you might have to fudge it a little bit. I admit that I've done it when I'm like, ugh, I have to rhyme that word, but the scansion is in the wrong place. But I found an example where a professional songwriter did it. So this is not the example, it's here for contrast. So you have, give my regards to Broadway. Maybe a slightly confusing one because it has both syllables on a downbeat, so they're kind of both stressed. But generally when you pronounce Broadway, it is Broadway. You put the stress on the first syllable. And I think because you have the whole note there next to the dotted half note, the slightly longer note does help that be the more stressed syllable. But then, if you've seen the musical The Producers, there's a song, I Want to Be a Producer. I want to be a producer with a hit show on Broadway. And yep, they have put that stress on the second syllable. Now, to be fair to them, even in the spoken dialogue, the characters seem to pronounce it Broadway. But it sounds a little off. I don't know if that was like an affectation on Mel Brooks's part, and he's kind of doing it for a joke, but yeah, they deliberately went and put that downbeat on the wrong syllable. Yeah, so there you go. And so I wanted to, oh, doing very good on time. I think I might wrap up a little early, but I want to wrap up with some sort of examples of doing cool things with Scansion in action. One of which is sea shanties, which are apparently big on TikTok now, or were, so maybe you've heard some. But yeah, they're workshop songs aboard ship, and rhythm was really important because it was how they kept everyone in time doing a task together. And in fact, you can look at the song and figure out what kind of task or tasks it could be used for. So if it was a long drag or halyard shanty, you'd have call and response, which is very common in shanties. And so after 2 measures of call, you'd have 2 measures of response with 2 very strong downbeats there. So, as I was out walking down Paradise Street, yet with a way, hey, below the man down, a pretty young damsel I chanced for to meet. Give me some time to blow the man down. And on those 2 downbeats, everyone would tug the rope together and then tug again, and then they've got 2 measures to get their breath back. So that's a long drag shanty because it's if you're going to be hauling on this rope for a while to do a big job like putting up a sail. For a short drag shanty, if you're just going to need fewer really strong pulls. So you'd have a verse, not so much regular rhythm because that again, it's the get your breath back part. But then you'd have the chorus end on a really strong downbeat, like, way, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. And then on Joe, everyone does a big yank on the rope. And then hand over hand shanty, it's if you might still be hauling a rope, but you'd have something lighter on the end of the rope, so you can haul it pretty fast. So you want to have a steady beat to keep everybody hauling it together. So you have, what do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor? And you're kind of pulling the rope. Is it, what do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor? And I've actually found some videos showing this timing in action. So this first one is a halyard shanty. So you'll see everyone do the 2 tugs on the chorus. All right, and so the second one is windlass shanty. You can see them operating the windlass. And so you'll notice that on the stressed syllables, you can see that them pulling the handle up and down. So yeah, so you can see it going up with it. Cheer up, me lively lads, we'll all get drunk together. A lot of these are about drinking. It's sailors, what can you do? So, and I had some other examples of songwriters using Scansion, what I thought was a cool way. Sorry, it's hard to go to the next slide. There we go. So this is from the musical The Music Man. It's the opening number. It's called Rock Island. And so in this number, you have a bunch of salesmen on a train. And you don't even really have a melody here. you've just got words, but the scansion of the words is imitating the rhythm of the moving train, even to the point where that you start slow and get faster because the train is speeding up. Let's get about 45 seconds in.
Cash for the merchandise, cash for the white goods, cash for the cotton goods, cash for the hard goods, cash for the fancy goods, cash for the soft goods, cash for the noggins and the pins and the firkins, cash for the hogshead, cask and demijohn, cash for the crackers and the pickles and the fly. Lord, what are you talking?
So there, yeah. And so for another example, more recently of musical theater where they're using basically just the lyrics, giving it a rhythm without really having a melody. Got this bit from Hamilton where they're doing a rap battle.
The issue on the tape. Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt and establish a national bank. Secretary Jefferson, you have the floor, sir. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals, we shouldn't settle for less. These are wise words, enterprising men quote them. Don't act surprised, you guys, cause I wrote them. Ow, but Hamilton...
Yeah, I guess there's more melody here than there was in Rock Island, but it's really letting the words carry the rhythm.
The very seat of government where Hamilton sits. Not true. Oh, if the shoe fits wearing. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Our debts are paid, I'm afraid. Don't tax the South, cause we got it made in the shade. In Virginia, we plant seeds in the ground. We create.
It does that every time too. Yeah, so that basically sums it up. I've got links here to some of the sources I use. So yeah, music theory, TikTok, sea shanties tell you a little bit more about how the rhythm of shanties works. Why Shakespeare Could Never Have Been French covers iambic pentameter, explains about prosodic and lexical stress, and also has some part about the scansion of limericks. And the third one is an article by that person who did the tweet where you had Hallelujah and Sweeney Todd, and where she talks about kind of the swapping in the lyrics to different tunes. And there's my email there if anyone has. Writing a song, do you need to use scansions? Well, the thing is, the words are going to have scansion, whatever you do, because we're speaking English and it has lexical stresses. So what you want to do is pay attention to how the scansion of the words interacts with the stresses in the melody. Because, I mean, I guess I don't know about every musical tradition, but in Western music, you have those measures with the stress on the downbeat. And so you don't want to put it in a place where you have a stress in the music coming on an unstressed word, because that ends up wrecking your lexical stress and you say it wrong. But if you're starting out songwriting, I recommend starting with an existing tune and putting in new words for it. Or the other way around, if you want to try composing, take a poem and try to put it to a tune. And kind of one of the places you can start out there is work out where the stresses are in the text and figure out from that where you're going to divide your measures. Which is something I occasionally do, setting poems to music as a hobby in addition to songwriting. I've done both parody songs where there's an existing tune that I made words for, but I've also done fully original songs where I write both the words and the music. Yeah, so I'll be hanging around a little longer. If you have any further questions about meter, scansion, songwriting, that sort of thing, I'll be around to answer.